morning to all, and thank you for joining us in this interesting lecture. I am proud to announce our lecture series, Sustainable Agriculture, A Vision for the Future of Zamorano, which is part of the AgVision initiative. AgVision is a discussion platform where representatives from the faculty and the Board of Trustees discuss the challenges and current trends in agriculture in the search for sustainable solutions for the sector. Sustainability, and therefore sustainable agriculture, promotes an approach in which environmental, social, and economic considerations are equally valued. There is no doubt that the agricultural sector has a direct impact on sustainable development. Therefore, Zamorano students nowadays must increasingly have a better understanding of the great challenges and opportunities our sector faces. When designing and executing their productive projects, they must be aware of the environmental, social, and economic repercussions of their work, and they must be able to assess these. They must think long-term and consider the impacts of their activities. The purpose of the lecture series is to initiate a process of social learning about sustainable development. We have invited various lecturers working in academia, research institutions, and private companies on issues related to agriculture and sustainable education. During the seminars throughout 2021, speakers will present concepts, ideas, and experiences that will serve as input for our transition process towards an organization based on sustainability in the production and processing sectors, as well as in the academic program and institutional management. Today, we are honored to start the seminar series with Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, renowned economist, professor, and director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, New York, USA, where he holds the rank of university professor, the university's highest academic rank. He is widely recognized for bold and effective strategies to address complex challenges, including debt crisis, hyperinflations, the transition from central planning to market economies, the control of AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, the escape from extreme poverty, and the battle against human-induced climate change. Dr. Sachs held the position of director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University from 2002 to 2016. He is president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, a commissioner of the United Nations Broadband Commission for Development, and an SDG advocate for the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez. He has also served as special advisor to various United Nations secretaries. He has authored and edited numerous books, including 3 New York Times bestsellers. He was the co-recipient of the 2015 Blue Planet Prize, the leading global prize for environmental leadership. He was twice named among Times Magazine's 100 most influential world leaders and has received 34 honorary degrees. A survey by The Economist ranked him as among the 3 most influential living economists. Prior to joining Columbia, he spent over 20 years as a professor at Harvard University, where he received his Bachelor of Arts, Master of Arts, and PhD degrees. Dr. Sachs is a native of Detroit, Michigan, and currently resides in New York City. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today at Zamorano, Dr. Sachs.
Anna, thank you very, very much. And thanks to Zamorano for inviting me to this new lecture series. What a wonderful series on sustainable agriculture. And also greetings to all the students. I feel I know Zamorano because I've been hearing about this, your wonderful university for a long time. I had for many, many years a very close colleague and friend, Rafael Flor. He's currently a friend, but he's now at the Gates Foundation. He's a leader in sustainable agriculture globally, and he is a very proud alumnus of Zamorano. So I think it's 20 years that I've known and admired what you do. The topic of your lecture series is extremely timely and pertinent. Sustainable agriculture is crucial for almost every aspect of global well-being. And not only that, it is increasingly recognized as such at the very center of space. Before I turn to a few minutes of the substance of that challenge, let me note that diplomatically, the Summit on World Food Systems is one of three crucial back-to-back summits that are all interconnected with the question of sustainable agriculture. September at the UN General Assembly, World Food Systems. October in Kunming, China, will be COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity. COP, of course, means Conference of the Parties, the meeting of the signatory nations to the Convention on Biological Diversity. They will be meeting either virtually or in person in Kunming, China, to set goals on conserving biodiversity. This is also an urgent challenge because biodiversity everywhere. That means species abundance. It means ecosystems that are at grave threat. It means the loss of genetic diversity is a worldwide dire crisis at the same level and interconnected with the crisis of human-made climate change. So, Food System Summit, then the next month, the COP15 to set targets for biodiversity protection. Then in November is the COP26 of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And it's also the fifth anniversary in principle, though it's the sixth year, after the signing of the Paris Climate Agreement. What's the problem? The problem is that climate change is running out of control. We signed the Framework Convention on Climate Change already 29 years ago in 1992, but we have not succeeded in the critical task of stabilizing and then dramatically reducing the human-made or anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases. And so the climate change continues to worsen, even to accelerate. 2020 was tied for the warmest year on instrument record, tied with 2016, with warming in 2020 at 1.25 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level. And what's extraordinary about this is that 2020 was a La Nina year, whereas 2016 was an El Nino year. Usually with El Ninos, the world temperature warms because of the El Nino phenomenon. And during La Nina years, the world temperature cools. But because of underlying trends, even with 2020 being a La Nina year, it tied for the warmest with the El Nino year of 2016. Suffice it to say, the world will go to COP26 facing a calamitous situation of rapidly rising temperatures, of long-standing promises to do something about it, but still not succeeding in the goal. Why do I mention these three summits back to back? A food summit, a biodiversity summit, and a climate summit. Well, clearly, these are deeply interconnected. And it is land use, predominantly driven by agriculture, which is the common thread across all three of these summits. If we ask why is biodiversity under threat, the main factor is the agriculture sector. Because as the agriculture sector has expanded production to respond to a growing world population and growing demand in that population, especially for meat, which creates a huge demand for feed grains, it is agriculture that puts the most stress on land and that drives deforestation, land degradation, conversion of wetlands, loss of habitat of other species. So agriculture has been in direct conflict with biodiversity, replacing complex ecosystems, often with monoculture. And what about climate change? How does agriculture relate to climate change? Well, it's sobering to realize that the land use sector, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, AFOLU as it's called, is the number one sector of greenhouse gas emissions. Recent estimates suggest that about 30% of total emissions arise from land use. And this is stunning because when I think of climate change, I think mainly about fossil fuels, and I think mainly about energy transformation. But we're going to need food transformation, farm system transformation as well, if we're going to face the climate change issue. Where do those 30% of greenhouse gas emissions arise? Well, as you know, in many, many ways from agriculture. One is that as agriculture expands into forest margins, deforestation releases CO2 into the atmosphere. Of course, agriculture itself uses fossil fuels, diesel, petrol, and so forth, natural gas for making the ammonia-based fertilizers, and so on. So in the life cycle of our food supply is a lot of carbon dioxide emissions. Agriculture also directly releases methane, both in ruminant animals, especially cattle, and also in paddy agriculture, in rice agriculture, where you have anaerobic respiration releasing methane. Our fertilizers, more than 100 million metric tons of nitrogen-based fertilizers each year, release nitrous oxide, another major greenhouse gas. So whether it's the inputs to the agriculture, the extent of the agriculture, the energy use in the life cycle of farming, all of those add up to about 30% of total anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases. We have a big set of interconnected, complex challenges. Let me add one more complexity to the table, which is that at the core, our farm system should accomplish two basic things, one primary goal and one result from that goal. The primary goal should be healthful and nutritious diets for the world. But even here, with all of the science and know-how, we have a huge problem in healthful diets in the world. Not mainly due to farmers, but mainly due to what the food industry does to the output of the farmers. Because the fact of the matter is, somewhere around half of the world population, something like 4 billion people, are chronically malnourished. Roughly 1 billion people do not get adequate caloric and protein intakes per day. They're classified as hungry. Another 2 billion people lack some critical micronutrients. they don't have healthful diets because of micronutrient insufficiencies or imbalanced diets in which there's too much grain and carbohydrates and not enough proteins or omega-3 fatty acids or other critical components of a healthful diet. And another billion people, bringing us up to 4 billion, are obese. And obesity is a reflection overwhelmingly of our food processing industry, because the food industry figured out a long time ago that sugar is addictive, and sugar in excess amounts is not only addictive, but toxic, leading to metabolic disease, but also highly processed foods, taking whole grains and making them processed is tastier. It has longer shelf life. People like it in snacks, especially when sugar is added. But the result is tremendously unhealthy because the fiber associated with whole grains is stripped away by the processing. And it's the fiber that does so much to keep us healthy and to prevent metabolic disease. So first, we have a farm system that doesn't accomplish the core, which is, or I'd say a food system that doesn't accomplish the core, and that is a healthy diet for all. But then I said that in addition to that core goal, there's another core that is related, and that is decent livelihoods for farmers, and especially for agricultural communities, and especially for smallholder farmers. But we also have a worldwide crisis of smallholder farming. A lot of that is related to very small land sizes that are not really adequate to sustain families, because in much of sub-Saharan Africa, farms are at half a hectare or smaller and just can't produce enough to sustain families on that. And at the same time, climate change, especially more frequent droughts, storms, floods, and other associated crises, heat waves, are causing great instability for production of smallholder farmers. Well, I've given a litany of challenges because the question that I wanted to share with you is, what should we discuss at the World Food System Summit? What should we aim to achieve? And the answer is a holistic vision of farming that addresses the multiple challenges that I just indicated. First, healthful, nutritious diets for the whole world. Second, facing up to agriculture's unsustainability in terms of the production systems, because agriculture must not be the source of destruction of biodiversity or the source of unsustainable climate change. And yet it is both of those right now. The third major challenge is the resiliency of this food system, which is under massive, massive difficulty because climate change is leading to water stress. Climate change is leading to loss of pollinators. Climate change is leading to more storms, droughts, heat waves, floods. And so it's destabilizing the production systems of farmers, especially smallholder farmers. And when we add in the fourth dimension, sustainable livelihoods of farmers, we have a whole package that needs to be viewed in a holistic manner. So what we are after at the World Food System Summit is a holistic, sustainable, globally interconnected food system that delivers healthful diets, that delivers sustainable land use, that ensures resiliency, and that addresses the real needs of farm communities around the world. Now, Zamorano, your community knows a lot about the answers to those, and we're going to need a lot of training around the world in order to train the future leaders of sustainable food systems to achieve these goals. Let me close by highlighting what I think are some of the key solutions that we're going to be driving towards in order to achieve what we need, which is not only the sustainable food system, but within a broader sustainable development agenda, a sustainable energy system, and an inclusive social system, which means social justice for all and inclusion for all. So it's a nesting of agendas and objectives that we need. I have to say that for many years, the idea of even addressing this complex challenge was seemingly impossible and delayed during the time that we had Trump as president, because he was an enemy to almost every word and concept that I've been saying. He was a climate denier because he was funded by the oil industry and because he was not an alumnus of Zamorano, so he didn't even understand any of the issues. He was an enemy of inclusion because he was part of an uncaring billionaire group that saw everything for their personal good rather than for the social good. Now we have a new president, much more constructive, who has immediately, in the first day of office, brought the United States back into the Paris Climate Agreement after Trump had pulled the United States out. And so that's very promising. It says that the United States is committed again, as it always should have been, to finding practical solutions. One of the things I hope the United States is committed to is cooperation within our hemisphere on practical solutions, because Trump was also an America first in the most narrow and nasty sense. And we need hemispheric cooperation to solve every one of the problems that I just noted. Is it possible to find solutions to these challenges? The answer is yes. Fortunately, we have powerful science and technology that if we deploy in the right direction, we can make headway. We saw that even in the midst of COVID-19, because within less than 1 year, scientists delivered several effective vaccines, something that would have required 15 to 20 years minimum in the past, but was achieved within 1 year because of the power of the new technologies. So we're going to need a mix of technological changes and behavioral changes and social and political changes to get to the sustainable food system that we want. We are going to have to start with the moral concept of inclusion, that everybody needs to be part of the solution, that everybody needs to contribute, the rich along with the poor, and that everybody should be brought along and no one can be left behind. My starting point in this would be to look at healthful diets for all. 4 billion people malnourished in one way or another is not adequate. Of course, the challenge is not only for farmers, but for a food industry, which is literally poisoning us with sugar addictions and with highly processed foods that are leading to mass obesity and metabolic disorders. So the food sector as a whole needs to get its act together. People are going to have to change their dietary behavior as well. We're going to have to eat less meat, and we're going to have to shift to plant-based proteins for our own health and to save the planet, because we can't go on with the extent of beef consumption requiring 10 to 15 kilos of food grain for every kilogram of beef consumption. We're going to have to be more economical and more healthful in our food choices, more legumes, more fruits grown, more basic foods, not highly processed and without the sugar additives and the ultra processing, so that we have healthful diets for all. And since people eat different things in different parts of the world, culturally, agronomically, we're going to need to find solutions for healthful diets in each part of the world that are culturally respectful and that also are aligned with the local food products and the wondrous variety of foodstuffs that we see in the world. We're going to need to use that change of our diets to also direct the limits of the food growing area, because we can't go on expanding into the forest margins in Southeast Asia, in the Amazon, in the Congo Basin, and elsewhere. Deforestation has many causes, but one of them is the expansion of pasture lands and croplands. And we're going to have to draw some lines to keep the habitats intact. Of course, this also requires higher yields per hectare. So we're going to need better farm methods. That's your specialty. You train farmers how to be productive using precision inputs, achieving higher values and higher productivity outputs. This will be essential. And reducing inputs where possible for more efficient fertilizer use, for example, to reduce nitrous oxide emissions and the cost of farms through precision fertilization will be key. I have no doubt that adopting new technologies will play a very significant role. We're going to digital farming. We're going to precision farming. We're going to artificial intelligence systems. My group works on tele-agriculture projects where we're using distance training and distance advising to help smallholder farmers gain access to the best information, whether it's markets, inputs, agronomy, pest control, or other areas. So we're going to want to really deploy these technologies. And we're also going to want to make a very healthful and dynamic interaction between rural areas and urban areas. I have no doubt that urbanization is going to continue and should continue. There will probably be reductions of populations in rural areas. Many really are overcrowded in Africa right now, where farm sizes are just so tiny that they don't support livelihoods. So a healthful interaction between increasing urbanization and increasingly productive and remunerative agriculture will also be part of the story. Well, there's so much to discuss, and I hope that these brief remarks are just an opening for ongoing discussion with the Zamorano University. I would love to have more connection, and also for Zamorano to help inspire and inform the global network on sustainable development that I am honored to lead for UN Secretary General Guterres, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We have more than 1,000 universities around the world, all pulling in the same direction to bring the best knowledge, the best education, the best training, and the best policy analysis to bear to help move towards sustainable development for all. And I know that Zamorano University could play a huge role in that, helping to bring knowledge to bear in all parts of the world. Let me close here. Thank you very, very much for the chance to give these brief remarks in your opening series on sustainable agriculture, and to thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Sachs. My name is Aris. I'm leading the master program in sustainable agriculture. And we have 3 students here who would like to ask you some questions about your discourse. The first one is Alejandro Cruz. She's from Honduras.
Great.
And she will... Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Sachs, and to everybody here present. So my question is, healthy and sustainable food products with special labels such as fresh or organic can be currently more expensive than conventional products. How can we adapt the sustainable diet to be more affordable for most people in Latin America?
Great, Alondra, thank you very, very much. I think one part is our public policies to encourage and enable more growing of vegetables, legumes, fruits, and so forth, and to focus on exactly improving marketing, scale of production, productivity, to make these products more affordable. In the U.S., by the way, I'm engaged in an effort to try to help the poorest people in the U.S. who use what we used to call food stamps, but public support to buy more healthful foods. So even in a rich country, of course, we have terrible malnutrition in the United States, the highest obesity rate in the world. And poor people are especially vulnerable to bad diets because of what you say. The food is more expensive, the healthful diets and so forth. So we're looking at ways to transfer income and bolster incomes of poor people and direct them to more healthful diets for their own good and through their own knowledge. But you raise a pertinent question that is not fully solved by any means. What the FAO showed in the 2020 State of Food Insecurity Report, which is their annual report, is that healthful diets right now are out of reach of about 3 billion people in the world. It's dramatic. So poverty is dramatic, and overcoming poverty is a core principle goal for the international system. That can't be solved by farming alone, but directing farming towards the high quality, nutritious products that are needed is part of the solution. I wish I could give you the full answer, but we don't know the full answer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The second question by Aquile Gonzalez, and he's from Nicaragua.
Great. You're on mute, Aquileo. Still not hearing you.
Thanks for the presentation, Dr. Sass. The next question is about the government action. So the question is, to reach the sustainable development goals, government have to define country targets and shared targets that require regional coordination. What strategies or guidelines do governments to follow this?
Great. Excellent question. My favorite question, actually, because you can't achieve these goals without plans. And we need governments to help guide those plans. Moreover, you can't achieve these goals without cooperation within the region. because it makes no sense for the individual countries of Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, to do this by themselves, because these are regional scale issues. If you try to make a clean power system, having an interconnected grid within Central America is much, much more efficient than trying to do it one country at a time. And so I'm a strong believer in regional cooperation. Now, basically, countries need a Green New Deal. And Europe has made a European Green Deal that it adopted at the start of 2020. It calls for a green energy system. It calls for sustainable land use. It calls for reducing waste through the circular economy. It calls for digital technologies to underpin this. And I would like to see a Central American or Latin American Green Deal. In fact, I'll be convening some of Latin America's energy ministers next month for a meeting about how to create a renewable energy system. I also believe that the Inter-American Development Bank should be, and the CAF, should be greatly expanded to enable governments to tap into low interest credits to build much more infrastructure, especially clean energy and digital, as the underpinning for the rest of the transformations, whether it's precision agriculture, whether it is access to education or healthcare. Everything requires electrification, renewable, and digital. And so I would like to see a big expansion of financing for those areas. And that's the job of the Inter-American Development Bank. So one of the things I'll be pushing this year is for a big expansion of lending capacity, taking into account the low interest rates that we have in the world financial markets right now, which mean that in principle, the terms for borrowing could be quite good if the region comes up with a good strategy.
Thank you. Perfect. And the last question is from Daniela Redrogan, and she's from Ecuador.
Great.
Good morning, Doctor. My question is, how can private education and research institutions like Zamorano contribute to reach national and international sustainable development targets?
Great. Well, you can imagine that's my daily message, which is that universities, great teaching centers, have a unique role to play because they do three big things. They do research. We need knowledge for how to improve agricultural efficiency, for example. They do education and leadership of you as the new leaders in this effort, and that is absolutely essential. And universities convene and bring together stakeholders, governments, civil society, indigenous communities, students, scientists, and that's another unique role of universities. Our governments don't really know what they're doing, I have to say, because the expertise is not in the governments. They're politicians. If they're good, they know certain things. They know how perhaps to make a national program or initiate public support. Many are unfortunately very divisive and harmful, like Trump was. But in general, they're not scientists. They're not experts. They don't really understand these issues. And yet they're the presidents or the parliament or the people that are responsible. So I believe that it is the responsibility of the knowledge institutions to get together to put forward proposals that are based on data, science, evidence. In the United States, I worked on an effort this past year on how to decarbonize the U.S. energy system. We call it the Zero Carbon Action Plan. It was made by representatives of about 20 universities. It's now shared with the Biden administration, and I'll be discussing with the new leaders in the United States some of these different aspects of this plan. But the idea was to bring the knowledge of the universities to bear on these problems. And I think that this is something that would be of huge improved value across Latin America. Sometimes politicians think universities are a nuisance. Students complain, budgets are costly. They don't understand that universities are the life of the future of the country, producing the leaders, the knowledge, the know-how to actually move forward. So that's how I would view the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a long list of other questions on our chat list, but it will be impossible to attend today. So we're going to use those in our discussion on ag vision at Zamorano. We're going to close the question session now, and I will give the floor to Erik Petersen, our president of Zamorano. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Sachs, on behalf of the students, the faculty, and the Board of Trustees of Zamorano, I'd very much like to thank you for taking the time today to share your valuable experience and insight on the topic of sustainable development. As Adia said, unfortunately, we've come to the end of today's webinar session, and we won't be able to address the large number of questions that have been put on the chat as you've been going through the presentation. So clearly your presentation has sparked quite a bit of interest from our graduates across the Latin America region, and we hope to be able to have you join us again at some point in the future on another session at some point. As you mentioned, our goal at Zamorano is to build these future leaders that will affect the food systems in Latin America at all different levels, at the private sector level, at the public level, at the academic level. And it's been very, very helpful to have your insight and your points expressed to all of our graduates so that they take that into account as they go about their daily lives throughout Latin America. So thank you once more, and we hope to have you back sometime again in the future.
Thank you. You can count on that, and let's continue to explore ways to collaborate, but congratulations on all that you do, and thanks for the chance to be with you and with all the students today. Appreciate it.
Gracias.